Guys, hope you had a good afternoon. I've seen some pictures of one bald guy in particular with being harassed for photos and various things, so I don't know who's won the Nathaniel challenge, but we'll see later. Nathaniel had 5 challenges for those who are confused for his birthday. So, yeah. Any presents? No worries.
If you haven't signed it already, please feel free to. Just give it a heads up. Sorry.
Cool. Yeah, anyway, we'll start on there. We're going to sing a song. James is welcome to play cajon. I don't think he wants to. Nice. Give James a clap. We ready? Nice. So this is a song chosen by Nathaniel for his birthday. 865, When the Roll is Called Up Yonder. 865.
Okay, well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break. I took a stroll down to the beachfront area and felt like I'd strayed into a foreign world of pirates and gypsies. Yeah, no one told me there was a pirate festival, and I thought, like, well, this is just how Whitby is. This is brilliant, you know. So, yeah, I definitely took some fashion tips from some of the chaps. One guy, it was just like Jack Sparrow. It was amazing. So I was standing there like taking photos and then like followed them along. It was brilliant, like a whole family of pirates. This is crazy. I've got good stories to take back to Scotland with me. Anyway, right, we are changing gears, not so much. So this kind of builds on that last talk slightly. And we're going to be looking at this idea of Christianity is just blind faith. There's no reason for it. You just believe it. That's the charge that's laid at Christians' feet, and specifically belief in God. So we could do so much looking at, is the Bible reliable? Did Jesus rise from the dead? We often do like whole weekend seminars and all these questions. With this talk particularly going to just be focusing in on, do we have good reason to believe that God exists? Now, we've touched on it a little bit from the scientific point of view in the previous talk, and now we're going to move on. So sometimes people would say, oh, it's just blind faith. Or they might frame it differently and say, Christianity, it's not really true, but it's a crutch to help you. So only weak people really believe in Christianity. Again, there's no reason for it. You just believe it because, it's this crutch to help you through life. I would contend that understanding just how broken we are as people and how sinful we are is that we actually need far more than just a crutch. We need a stretcher bearer. Even more than that, we need to be made alive again. But that's an aside. Anyway, so let us. Oh, am I on? Beep. There we go. Before I leap into the content, I just want to back up a little bit and say something about why we actually engage in answering people's questions, why we engage in giving reasons for what we believe. So if you have a Bible with you or your phone, you can, I've got it up on the screen as well, but nice to see you ruffle through your pages of your scriptures there. Make Dave proud. 1 Peter 3, verse 14 to 16. 1 Peter 3, verse 14 to 16. Now, the Apostle Peter is writing to the church, sort of group of churches maybe, who are experiencing persecution for their faith. And he's basically been encouraging them to good Christian living and to stand firm and hold on. And then he gets to this section in 1 Peter chapter 3, and he says this: "But even if you should suffer for righteousness, you are blessed." Okay, that's so count your sufferings all joy. "Do not fear them or be intimidated." That's those who are persecuting you, who are challenging you. Don't fear them, but in your heart regard Christ the Lord as holy. Okay, so that's the starting point. There's this commitment to our Lord Christ Jesus, regarding him as holy. The disposition of our heart is focused upon Jesus. That's the starting point. So him, like saying, that's the given. Now, ready at any time to give a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you. Okay, so the word there, defense, and the word there, reason, are taken from the Greek word apologia, which is then rendered into English apologetic. So when you are, someone asks you why you believe what you do, and you say, well, here are my reasons, whatever comes out of your mouth next is an apologetic. It is a reason or a defense for what you believe. So if you ever come across this big scary word apologetics, that's really where it comes from primarily, and it's nothing to be scared of. It's just saying, we have set our hearts aside. We are focused on Christ. We know that we have hope. So it's always linked to this hope that we have, which is hope in this life to be freed from the dominion of sin, and then ultimately that Christ will be returning. These are just some of the aspects of the Christian hope. And Peter's compelling us to be able to give reason. So it's not something that's unbiblical. We see it commanded explicitly to the Christian here, and we see it modeled implicitly all the way through something like the book of Acts. But then crucially, it says in verse 16 there, "Yet do this," give these answers, this defense, "with gentleness and reverence, keeping a clear conscience, so that when you are accused, those who disparage your good conduct in Christ will be put to shame." So as you go about this, as you learn how to give answers for your faith, now that might be sometimes, maybe you're someone who's very geared towards apologetics, and you might be able to give an amazing defense with lots of syllogisms and lots of evidence and all of that, that's fine. Do it with gentleness and respect. Maybe that's not the way that you're geared, and you can just share something of what the Lord has done in your life as He has saved you, as you have come to know Him. Even sharing your testimony is giving a reason. I didn't know God. I come to know Him. He has saved me. He has moved me from darkness into light. And you've experienced that. No one can take that away from you. That in itself is a reason for the hope that you have. So that by way of framing what is going to follow. And I'm just going to now go through a couple of things. So the word evidence, I've mentioned it previously. There's proof, hard proof, like mathematical proofs. There's evidence. As much as I think that the word evidence is good, what I like to think of are what are the pointers that point us toward God's existence. What are the breadcrumbs that we can follow as we clue things together and say, oh, well, actually this makes sense. There's a good case to be made for God existing. So we're going to look at a couple of things. The first is the cause of the cosmos. The second is the fingerprints of the Creator. Then basically the moral aspect of things, titled That's Just Wrong, and then intuitions of the heart, which we've touched on slightly, and you'll see when we get there. And then wrestling with, well, what is the best explanation of all the things we see? Is it that God exists, or that God doesn't exist? Spoiler alert, I think, points to God existing. Right. So, let us start. There we go. Yeah, that's the right one. The cause of the cosmos. I'm going to give you a syllogism. Who knows what a syllogism is? There. Oh, come on. There we go. Good. So a syllogism is basically premises leading to a conclusion. Statements that you can make that lead you to draw a certain conclusion. So when it comes to the cause of the cosmos, basically the universe, and we're saying like, well, where did it come from? You can actually formulate that into an argument for the existence of God. Okay, so this is pretty much as technical as this is going to get. But this is very, very, very powerful. Okay, so follow the logic here. So you say, premise one, whatever begins to exist has a cause of its existence. Right? Premise two, the universe began to exist. So logically, it follows that therefore the universe had a cause of its existence. Okay, so the thing is, when you have a syllogism like this, what you can do is go to premise one, see if it's true. Go to premise two, see if it's true. Okay, so let us go to premise one. Whatever begins to exist has a cause of its own existence. Now, we know this intuitively, right? In your everyday life, as you're going along and you sit down at a table, a cup of, what is that? It's a cappuccino of some kind. I think it's got banana on top. I don't know what's up with that. This is what happens when you grab pictures off Google. So when you sit down, a cappuccino, a coffee, a cup of tea, whatever it is, it doesn't just manifest, pop into existence out of nothing, right? You know that someone, somewhere, actually makes it, puts it into the cup, and then brings it to you. Is there any example of anything that randomly just pops into existence without something causing it to do that? We'll sit here for a very long time and we'll come up with nothing. We know that as soon as we encounter something in the world, something caused it to be there. This lectern, whatever you call it, someone made this. This microphone, someone made this. The clothes you're wearing, someone made them. All of these things, they came into existence because they have a cause. So premise one is pretty solid. I don't think anyone can really get around it. No one denies that that is the case. Okay, what about premise two then? The universe began to exist. Do we have good reason to believe that the universe began to exist? Because if it's just eternal, if it's always been there, maybe it didn't have a creator. Maybe it didn't have a cause for its existence. And so that might question then, well, it's just always been there. We don't need God to make sense of any of this. So listen to the words of Stephen Hawking, the cosmologist who we've encountered earlier. So he wasn't a Christian, but this is what he says. Almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. Interesting. Don't let the phrase Big Bang throw you. Often people will say, like, oh, we know what caused the universe. It was the Big Bang. We don't need God. Well, that's sort of just stealing the term. The Big Bang is actually a pejorative term that someone, when they were looking at the evidence for the beginning of the universe, someone just said, oh, well, like it's I think it was Fred Hoyle actually coined the term the Big Bang, and basically it's a description of the beginning of the universe. So scientifically, there we go. We have many, many, many lines of evidence that point to a beginning of the universe, a Big Bang. Okay, we don't need to be scared of the term Big Bang. We just know who banged it. It was God, right? So I'm not going to go through these, but you have something like the second law of thermodynamics, which is entropy. Generally, things tend to disorder, which means they started off very ordered. So when you look at the universe, it's tending towards disorder. It's running down thermodynamically, and then it's also expanding. And if you sort of extrapolate backwards, it goes zoop. It had a starting point, but it's expanding more and more and more and more. So then a couple of other lines of evidence. But scientifically, all the evidence points to a beginning of the universe. Okay? All the scientific evidence points that way. Interestingly enough, up until the 1950s, when these discoveries were made, people kicked against the idea of the beginning of the universe, and they said, oh no, it's always been there. It's eternal. And why did they do that? Because if you suggested that it had a beginning point, you were aligning far too closely with what Genesis 1 tells us, that in the beginning God created. So suddenly, in the 1950s, when all this information came to light, suddenly, all the science starts confirming what we already know, what the Bible already tells us, is that the universe had a beginning in the finite past. Okay, so that means that we have premise 1, nobody really denies, things don't just pop into existence, they need a cause. Premise 2, the universe began to exist. All of the scientific evidence points to that fact. Now, people have they're trying to come up with lots of different ways to get around that, but it still really stands. The universe began to exist. So it is unavoidable that the conclusion follows, and that is the universe has a cause of its own existence. It has a cause. Okay, it doesn't explain its own existence. It needs a cause to explain its existence. Now, you might say, so what? What's that have to do with God? That seems like really, really, really vague. Well, let's look at what that cause might have to be. It's going to have to be spaceless because it created space. It's going to have to be timeless because it created time. Immaterial because it made material, it made the stuff. It needs to be extremely powerful. To create out of nothing, you need to be very, very powerful. It needs to be intelligent because the creation event and the universe itself are extremely precise in what we see, in the way they work and operate. And also, very importantly, needs to be personal. It needs to be a personal cause because only persons can decide to do things. Right? So if it wasn't personal, it's just some random force of some kind, it couldn't go from not creating the universe to creating the universe. That's a choice that has to happen. That comes from minds. It comes from persons. Okay, so we have those attributes. And interestingly enough, I think those align quite well with what the Bible already actually tells us about who God is. Those are just a couple of scriptures. I'll send you the PDF as well so you can go and scrutinize those to see if I'm making it up. But what we see essentially is that you have these attributes. You have the beginning of a universe that must be from a cause that has these attributes, and then it turns out that, actually this is just describing the God of the Bible. So science itself, cosmology, points to the existence of a God who is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, extremely powerful, intelligent, and personal. It's a person, someone that we could communicate with in some way. So that's the first line of evidence, the cause of the cosmos. Cosmology points to the existence of God. Okay, let's move on then to the fingerprints of the Creator. I won't spend much time here. This is something we've gone over. The applicability of mathematics, the fine-tuning of the universe, And here, I'd mentioned that there are all of those. There were those, the cosmological constant, the gravitational constant. What you have here are a whole bunch of other ones, also very, very, very finely tuned. So what we see is when we look at all these things, they are very finely tuned. They need an intelligence. They point to an intelligence beyond themselves. Let's move on to this one. I want to spend a little bit of time here on this idea of, I've titled it That's Just Wrong, but this would be the moral aspect. We're moving from the sciencey side to now good and evil, wrong and right, the moral intuitions that we have. Okay. This is Biby Aisha. This is the 2010 cover of Time magazine. She was a young Afghan girl who was married off to a Taliban warlord, and then she tried to run away. She was, I think, captured by her family. They cut her nose off, cut her ears off, and left her for dead in the wilderness of Afghanistan, I think it was. Luckily, the UN was going through that area and somehow picked her up, got her across to, I can't remember where it was exactly, but got her medical treatment. And now if you had to see a picture of her, you wouldn't recognize her. She's had a lot of reconstructive surgery and is living a somewhat normal life in the US, if I'm not mistaken. There was a teacher who took this example and put it to a class of 15-year-olds and said to them, was what happened to Biby Aisha wrong? And very quickly, everyone nodding their head, yes, of course that's wrong. So he said, okay, very good. Well, why? Why is it wrong? A few hands shot up and says, okay, to the one boy, yes, why? Well, because it infringed on her human rights. Another girl said, yeah, because it hurt her, And yes, very good. And then he just said, well, why is that wrong? Why is it wrong to infringe on human rights? Why is it wrong to harm someone else? This time it took a little bit longer for the hands to pop up. Eventually, a boy at the back sticks his hand up and says, well, it just is wrong. We know it's wrong. Right. And he just carried doing this again and again, asking this question, why? Why is it actually wrong? And this starts pointing to the fact that something that we all know and feel, and that is that we are made as human beings as something special, and that to infringe on human rights and to hurt someone is to actually commit a real moral evil. It's not just a thing of subjectivism. It's not just, oh, hey, that's your truth. Because that would, with the modern skepticism that we spoke about, I think, in the first talk, we could just say, oh, well, true for you that it was wrong to do that to her, but maybe my truth is a bit different. And that's what you see if it becomes subjective. But deep down, we all know that when we see something like this, it is objectively and absolutely wrong. Here's a way to sort of think about it a little more, considering evil and these moral wrongs. When you say that there is too much evil in this world, you assume that there is good. Okay, for there to be evil, there must be good. When you assume that there is good, you assume that there is a moral law on the basis of which we can differentiate between good and evil. Okay, you see something, you call it wrong. That is because ultimately there is a law that you can use to differentiate wrong from right. But if you assume a moral law, you must assume what? A moral lawgiver. Laws just don't pop into existence. They come from somewhere. They come from persons. They come from intelligence. They come from mind. So you must assume a moral lawgiver. But that, for the skeptic, is the thing, the one whom you are trying to disprove and not prove. Right? So when someone looks at the world and they say, oh, there's too much evil in the world for God to exist. Well, all of a sudden they're saying, they're appealing to a moral law. But where does that come from if there is no God? So the argument falls back on itself. It actually ends up proving that there is a God. So because if there's no moral lawgiver, there is no moral law. If there is no moral law, there is no good. If there is no good, there is no evil. What is the question then for someone who is complaining that God is evil or that, these things are just, essentially it all boils down to just being subjective, one person's preference over another. But that flies in the face of what we really know. So I think C.S. Lewis does such a good job of summarizing things. This whole idea, looking at Biby Aisha and what happened to her, and this idea of evil and good, he says, my argument, so he's talking from before he was a Christian, he says, my argument against God was that the universe seemed so cruel and unjust. But how had I got this idea of just and unjust? A man does not call a line crooked unless he has some idea of a straight line. Every time we look at the world and we see something that is evil or wrong, we are automatically appealing to an ultimate moral standard. Without God, there is no ultimate moral standard. And it's not just Christians that appeal to the standard. It is every single person. And the easiest way that you can, if someone says there is no moral standard, it's all up to you anyway, you just walk up and, don't do this, but just walk up and slap them. They will think that that was wrong. And you're like, oh, well, why was that wrong? Because it hurt me. Why is it wrong to hurt you? Well, that's just your truth. What's my truth, So it just defeats itself. It falls apart at every turn. Okay, so that's called the moral argument, and it points to the existence of a moral lawgiver who is God. Okay, then very quickly to wrap up, how are we doing on time? Pretty much run out of time, but that's okay. The intuitions of the heart. This is something that I've already alluded to in a previous talk. Much like the intuitions for moral right and wrong, there are many other things that we can point to that intuitively we know are real and true, that part of the human experience. The longing for justice, for morality, for love, purpose. Why should we be good stewards of the environment? Why does beauty draw us to the sublime? Things like this that are part of human experience are all things that point to something beyond just the physical realm. And so again, I remind you of that picture I gave you of the guy on the island who the things wash up on the shore and they're pointing to something beyond their immediate existence. And again, I'll just finish with this quote from C.S. Lewis. Again, I think I mentioned it before. If we find ourselves with a desire that nothing in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that we were made for another world. And so those are just a few very quick pointers or breadcrumbs that really push us in the direction of seeing that there is a God who stands above and outside the universe, and we have very, very good reason to believe in him. And so just again thinking about that verse in 1 Peter 3:15, if someone is pushing you saying like, why do you believe this? We have as Christians a wealth of evidence that we can point to, and we have to use it as a way to point people to the hope that is in Christ. Thank you very much.
Okay, so maybe we'll have a 5 minutes leg stretch, and then Dave will speak in 5 minutes.